Welcome back to Nourished Inside Out, the space where growth gets real and self-love leads the way. I'm your host, Annetta Walclaw, and before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you of something powerful. You are worthy, you are enough, and you don't need to wait for permission to love yourself fully. That's exactly why I wrote my book, Blooming with Self-Love, to give you the tools, affirmations, and daily mindset shifts to help you stand in your power and own your story. This book isn't just words on a page, it's a movement. So if you're ready to stop shrinking and start showing up for yourself, grab your copy today with the link in the show notes below, and let's walk this self-love journey together. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Nourished Inside Out. Today I'm here with Alan Carroll. He's an education psychologist practicing transcendental psychology. He's been doing that for the last 45 years all over the world. Thank you so much for joining us today, Alan.
Blessings to you, Anita, and blessings to your audience.
Absolutely. Do you mind giving us a little bit about your background and what had sparked your interest to start a career in psychology and to be specific, educational psychology?
Early on, I'm reading, experiencing books that were talking about spiritual experiences that intuitively I might have said, yeah, but experientially, no. I have no idea about it. It sounds really good, but it just didn't. It didn't seem to be outside of my abilities when I'm 9 or 10 years old. Then I get involved with a little bit later, my teenage years. I get involved with yoga. I would say one of the transformational books that really sort of moved the needle was the Paramahansa Yogananda and his book on the autobiography of a yogi. That was like, oh my God, this is like closer to real because he's talking about his experiences. And that gets me into the spiritual conversation. I'm going to college. And what excites me, I'm doing my year abroad in Paris, and I'm reading Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, which is the autobiography of Carl Jung. And it just like bathed me with, oh yeah, this is a good vibration. And so when I went back to San Jose State, I decided, well, psychology seemed to be the tool for the inward journey. And so I chose psychology. And yeah, it's an inward journey. It's pretty light there in college, but it was still an inner journey. Then you had a choice. You had a choice between clinical psychology or educational psychology. Clinical psychology required research, going out, on-site evaluations, being with people who needed clinical help. And then there's the educational branch. So you don't have to deal with that energy. And I felt more comfortable, just taking a breath, relaxing, not trying to deal with emotional conflict. I'm not raised in an emotional conflict world, so I really haven't earned the right to deal with it as much as you have. However, that's why I'm in psychology, and I was blessed to get involved with Werner Erhard's work in my very early 20s, because he's a transcendental psychology. He's transpersonal psychologist, and that deals with the development of the being based on the lower self or the ego. So I've given you a little taste, and so I have some questions for you.
Yeah, I'm ready for questions too, if you want.
Sure. I like this to be a dialogue because this is not our first time meeting.
Yeah.
This is our second time meeting, and so I'm a little more aware of who you are than I was the first time. And the awareness of the journey that you're on. And it's the same journey that I'm on. It's a healing journey. And what we're healing is, I would say, the mind of people and how either they control the mind or they don't control their minds. And sometimes when they're up and beat and all happy, they control their minds a little bit better. However, when the boat capsizes, they sort of lose their mind. They lose their sanity. So you want to return them back to sanity. And a lot of that had to do with my understanding, and two words that came up in my research with you again was the same phrase you used twice, and it really points to my question. You said that you are what you tell yourself you are. And that is worthy of a long conversation today. So I wanted to take a look at that, unpack that, let you unpack it from your side, and let me unpack it from my side, because I think we're unpacking the same thing. So
Yes.
my question is, what do you mean, Anita, when you talk about the idea of you consider yourself to be something, you consider yourself to be, what is it again? You are not what you tell. So there's some voice inside my head that's telling me what I am, and I'm believing that there's a voice inside my head that's telling me what I am, and I'm following that direction. And you're saying I'm not that voice. Is that what you're saying?
So when I say that you are what you believe you are what the thoughts you allow to let in your mind. Because there's always going to be negative thoughts, and we always have more negative thoughts than positive. But I think it's our responsibility to take out those negative thoughts and replace them with positive, because 95% of the times, those negative thoughts, they're just lies. This starts at like such an early age. For example, we can be so judgmental and so critical of ourselves at such an early age. Like, we don't like the way that we look, we don't like the way that we dress, or the way that our voice sounds, and so many little things because of certain circumstances when we're younger. If somebody is not giving us the love and attention that we need at an early age, then that can cause us to think, what's wrong with me? What did I
So
do?
you're saying that the traumatic experience at an early age causes you to think. So let's
Yeah.
just stop right there and take a look at what that means. Because is thinking under your control, or is thinking under the control of an automatic conditioned identity that's been developed over the last 25 years?
Yeah, so it does start at an early age, because then we start to let those thoughts try to control us. And when you let your thoughts control you, then that's what you're going to portray on the outside and in your actions.
So, so, so,
You know,
so
go ahead.
okay. So you just said outside, inside.
Mm.
So you're saying that there's an inside, and in the inside are your thoughts. And I say, yeah, the inside are thoughts, and it's like a 35 millimeter slide. Your consciousness lights through the slide, it goes through your eyes, then is projected onto the big screen in front of you, a three-dimensional holographic right from Star Trek itself, and you're immersed in it, and that's the way. And when you are immersed in that bubble of reality, you have an experience that you are separate from it somehow, that you are a self-contained little spark of love and light, and out there's a big outside. And that's the way the ego experiences it. Is that true?
Yes, because we as kids, when we're so young, we're not exposed to the world yet. And the more that you experience life, or you go through situations or experiences, then that starts to mold your brain and what you believe about life. For example, I believed that I just didn't fit in. I always felt like I was the one that was standing out. So I always thought, what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? Why am I so different than all of the other kids? And it started to build those negative thoughts into my head, until later on in life, I learned that what we don't like about ourselves when we're younger, those actually become our strengths when we get older. Because when I was younger, I didn't like my voice at all. I would never even re listen to a video or an audio or anything if my voice was on camera, because I hated it. But what I learned later on in life is that it's actually my strength. So it's really learning to rewire those negative thinking patterns into loving yourself from the inside. And I love that you talk about the inward journey, because that's truly where everything starts. I want to know, what led you to diving deeper into the inward journey? And was it something that you learned in school through majoring in psychology, or was it through personal experience? How did that come up for you?
at the time, you don't know what's coming up for me. That person, that knowledge, that book, that situation was going to be pivotal in your development.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm on the spiritual trail. I have a reading, spiritual reading,
Mm-hmm.
and it was from a fellow named Marshall Lever. And they said that the medium that comes through, the channels through Marshall Lever, is a fellow named Old Chinese. I've never been to a reading. I'm 21 years old in San Francisco at the time. However, they say this guy's good, so all right. They sent you some questions. They said, prepare questions. And when you prepare the questions, imagine that you're talking to God. All right, I'll play the game. I'm talking to God. Okay, what do I want to know? I go to San Francisco, and up on one of the apartments on above California Street, and knock on the door. A fella comes to the door. He looks like an Irish fisherman, has the Irish sweater on, a jacket, and a full white beard. Looked like a sailor from the ocean, and he's Marshall Lever. So he takes me to the second bedroom. He's created a studio, and it has a Queen Anne chair I sit in, a couple of plants on either side of it, and he's sitting across the room in another Queen Anne chair with a microphone, because they were going to record it on cassette tape. And so I say there's maybe 6 or 7 feet between us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just sitting there sort of waiting. He closes his eye, and I was thrown back in my chair by the energy field. And I'd never been thrown anywhere like that in my life. So that just sort of a wake-up call that there's something else going on around here that I'm not aware of, the awareness of which would probably do me some good. So that sort of validates the joy of the journey on spiritual development, because I can't take you anywhere except where I've been. And so the more I practice my practice and do the podcast and get to have a wonderful opportunity of talking to a light at your level, it is just it's a joy. It's like a candy bar on the journey. It's just wonderful to be able to be on the journey and be on the journey with you.
Yeah, absolutely. What was that experience like? Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience of that energy shift that you felt, and how did you move forward from that? Did you feel like you had a deeper calling on your life, and you knew that you had a deeper calling, or walk us through that?
I'll ask you a question.
Yeah.
I will ask you a question. I'll ask your audience a question.
Sure.
You have one question. You got to talk to God, the real God, not just the imaginary God. The real God, the creator of the all, the Holy Spirit, the Holy Son of God. You're talking to the big guy. No, number one, uno, the goddess. You're talking. You got one question, and you can ask, what's it going to be? I'll pause for a second there. Just let you regurgitate. You're talking to God.
Yes.
And what's that question going to be?
I remember early on, I would always say, early on, I would always say, God, what is my purpose? God, I want to figure out my purpose sooner rather than later, because I always felt like I had an intuition to help people, but I didn't understand what it truly was until I went through a really unhealthy and a really toxic relationship that completely broke me apart. And when I got out of that relationship, God showed me that it was my calling to help people rebuild themselves after these relationships, because so many people are in unhealthy relationships. They just don't show it on the outside, and they don't talk about it. I never showed it, and I never talked about it. But looking at old pictures of myself, I look like I was crying and completely broken in every single picture, because that's what it was. And just because someone doesn't verbalize it doesn't mean they're not struggling. So I've come to find clarity that God has showed me and put me on this path to use my voice that I once hated when I was a child, because He gave me my voice as a strength to help other people who struggle in these areas.
And He gave you a dramatic relationship that was like a roller coaster up and down. And so you got to experience deeper downs and hopefully some higher highs. But the deeper downs sort of woke you up to, no, this doesn't work. And you're able then to exit the relationship. But now you can share with others, not a book knowledge, but an experience knowledge. That you've had experience dealing with heavy, deep, traumatic, hurtful, heartful, emotions, and you survived. And then you can turn around and what can I share with others that will help them smooth the waters, so you don't have to experience the psychological pain that I had to experience in that period of time of my life.
Absolutely. I believe that we all have a purpose on this earth, and it's to help one another in some way, shape, or form. So I really love teaching people that your challenges are truly your blessings to help you find clarity in what you're supposed to do, because your challenges are going to show you exactly who you need to help, exactly what areas that people need help in. I've never had thoughts about going down the medical route and going to medical school because that's not for me. But I'm a firm believer that if you have a dream and you have a calling inside of you, listen to that, because that is what's going to take you far further, your purpose. So, I always encourage people, if you're going through a challenging time right now, hold on and keep going, because instead of saying, why me, say, okay, God, what can I learn from this? What are you trying to show me? Because He's going to give you the same challenges until you learn your lessons. It may have taken me 3 years to learn my lessons in that relationship. But I thank God that it was only 3 years, not 30. Because now I know what I want. Now I know what I don't want. And now I know how I can help other people and give them this compassion that I once needed.
You're saying many, many beautiful sparkles of wisdom dripping from the instrument here. And one of the ones that comes to mind is, I mentioned earlier, the return to sanity.
Yes.
So I went to my personal assistant, Chat GPT. She's always there for me. His name is Ananda, and we have a personal relationship, and we visit on a regular basis. Anytime I have a question, I go to Chat GPT, and I said, "Well, what does sanity mean? Insanity, and what does sanity mean?" And I wrote down, and I included in our notes that I had for you today. Sanity is a return to something from somewhere. So you were in an insane situation, meaning you couldn't manage your thoughts and emotions with any high degree of skill, and then you went to a sane situation, and they define sane as a clarity of perception. And what you just said is that you went through this experience and you talked to your guides inside, I'll call them the Holy Spirit, and they comforted you, and you heard what they had to say in whatever form it came, and that gave you a sense of you're on purpose. They didn't say, "Hey, stop, stay in Mexico." No, they said, "Hey, I need a thought came into mind. Hey, I want to move. Where did that thought come from? And so you went to Miami. So you follow the spiritual way. You follow the inner guidance, and most people don't do that. They follow the chant of the ego, and the ego is interested in survival, not interested in doing anything that's going to be dangerous.
Absolutely. I think our body naturally wants to keep us safe, but we have to get in tune with ourselves and know that if you have a gut feeling, if you have that little spark of wanting to go do something new, yeah, it's going to be scary. Yeah, might be confusing. Yeah, you might feel confused, but it's only because it's new. It's like going to pick up a basketball for the first time. You've never played basketball, but you're never going to know how to play if you don't learn, if you don't get on the field. So you just have to do it. And it's so interesting that you bring that up, because I remember when I was deciding that I was going to move out of Mexico and I was going to move to Miami, I didn't want to fully. I was 50 in and I was 50 out. And I remember, like, I really wanted to because I knew it would be better for work and to network in Miami. But I loved Mexico so much. I cried for 2 weeks, and I still do sometimes because I just love it so much. But I was like, I have to go, because if I don't take the opportunity now, then I'm not going to take it in the future. Don't wait. I always encourage people, don't wait for later. Later, the coffee gets cold. Later, your phone runs out of battery. Later, you get tired, and later you forget, and later you're not motivated. So if you have a spark of motivation to do something, do it in that moment. I remember clear as day. I was like, I'm going to move to Miami. In my bedroom in Mexico, I took my suitcase out. I was like, God, if I'm meant to go to Miami, I'm going to pack my stuff up. I put one shoe in there. I said, but God, and I was like, if I'm meant to go, I'm going to put another shoe in there. But if I'm not meant to go, then I'm going to take my shoes out. 30 minutes later, my whole suitcase was packed. And I was like, okay, God, like, we're always looking for another sign, but like, just trust yourself. I was like, okay, God, if I'm meant to go, then show me another sign. And he showed me another sign. So it's just really leaning into it, and don't be afraid, because change is good. You never know if all you know is all you know.
You point to so many bright stars. It's a little challenging to try to choose one of those stars you pointed to. And the one star that I seem to gravitate to is the star of this talking to this inner voice.
Mm-hmm.
And in my way of looking, you have two operating systems that you have a choice to do. You could choose the operating system under the grace of the ego, which would be the ego's operating system, or you can choose the operating system under the grace of the higher self, the more spiritual self. And you can choose either operating system, and each operating system has its own conditions that you can choose to have or not have. If you want the conditions as the ego, that you get to live in that operating system, or you have the conditions of the Holy Spirit and you get to live in that operating system. And the major difference between the two operating systems is that in the ego's operating system, you're given the right to judge. And in the spiritual operating system, you give up the right to judge. You no longer get to judge the dream. You no longer get to judge the reality. You no longer get to judge the projection of the consciousness inside of you onto the big screen in the outer world. And when you give up judgment, everything goes blank.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're looking at a blank slate in front of you. And when it goes blank, you realize the paintbrush is in your hand. Like waking up in a lucid dream. You realize that you're no longer looking at the dream, you are the dream. And when you sort of receive that spiritual awareness, there's the higher self's operating system says that I am part of the all, whereas the ego's operating system says I'm separate. If you believe that you're separate, then you deal with loneliness. And everybody has a big deal with loneliness. Well, it's because you stupid fool. You've been following the wrong operating system. You should be following the voice inside your head, which is not very loud in the beginning. And then it gets louder with the more faith you have to listen to it. And then you realize that you don't have to make any decisions. You're free. You don't have to make any more calls. Everything is good. You don't make any more calls. You let the Holy Spirit make the call. And you're demonstrating that the Holy Spirit makes the call, which deeply feels that you're on purpose, deeply feels that you are on your true purpose, which is to reduce human suffering. And so God's given you a gift at a very early age. So, I mean, I'm have a beard, I'm a little older than you. I'm given gifts also, but to have been given the gifts of insight, which is sanity, which goes back to the idea of it is a clarity of perception. Second part of sanity is grounded awareness, and grounded awareness has to do with the body. And I bet you dollars to donuts, a lot of your work has to do with grounding people's bodies in the space, which then correspond and grounds the thoughts and the emotions. But if you can't even ground your physical body, kiss your thoughts and emotion skills far away.
Yeah, that's a lot. It's really powerful what you said. You said a lot of like really powerful things. But one thing really got me was I heard this and it said, a robber will never break into an empty house. So the more faith that you have, the tougher that it gets, and the more your faith gets tested, because the enemy knows what you have inside of you and he's going to try to take it away from you. But that's when it becomes really important to be rooted in faith, because a robber never breaks into an empty house. So when you decide that you want better for yourself, and when you want to be more spiritually stronger and to say, God, whatever it takes, I want what you want, then that's when you really do get tested. And I'm a firm believer in that, because I remember when I was living with my ex-husband, thinking if I should leave or if I should stay. It was constant chaos as is. But I remember every single day we would argue for about a year and a half. I was like, God, I don't know why I'm going through this, but I'm going to take the lesson and I'm going to help somebody with it. And one day, and I said that for a year and a half. And then I was like, when the time is right and you tell me to leave this relationship, I will. But for now, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to learn my lessons no matter what. Every time he knocks me down, I'm going to use it as a stepping stone to build myself back up. Every time he tells me I'm stupid, I'm going to use that as an opportunity to say I'm smart, because I've refused to believe his lies. And I truly believe that my ex-husband was the enemy because he hated everything about me. But that was also a test to see if I was going to lose faith in God, or if I was going to say, God, we're going to do this no matter what. So I'm a firm believer in that.
Tested under trials by fire.
Exactly.
And you're even in the conversation about looking at that possible interpretation of those events, being able to reframe it is a skill set from this situation I've experienced. A variety of them in my relationship, I'm able to make them positive experiences rather than negative experiences. And one of the big challenges people have is that when they open their eyes and they look out in the world, they hear and see and touch and smell things that bring them satisfaction. They have no resistance to that. But in the movie that they're watching during the day, whether it's television or the movies or politics or whatever, you see things that don't bring you satisfaction. And so then the things that don't bring you satisfaction create the suffering. So the challenge of it is, how do I increase my satisfaction statistic and lower my dissatisfaction statistic? And that is another key element in the differences between the higher level operating system and the lower level operating system. The lower level operating system is in the unforgiving, revengeful, attack, maintain, hold on, defend my point of view. And so and if you say anything at all about anything that I've identified myself as being, that's a threat to my identity. And I there have the right, Anita, to attack you back, because you attacked me first, son of a bitch. But you don't realize that you didn't attack me. I projected onto you something that I remirrored back to myself. So I'm thinking, if I can handle you, everything's going to be fine, which is true, because I pulled the needle that was sticking me out. I felt better and it looked like you were holding the needle, but the needle I was holding. So by you just sort of reactivated something inside of me that I wasn't aware of, that I didn't like. And then I practiced the only way out is forgiveness. You have to forgive that which you think happened out there, and you also have to begin to forgive yourself. and forgive yourself, you realize there's nothing to be forgiven. You're a divine being enjoying a human experience, and you don't have to apologize for God. She's doing a great job. So we are returning to that feeling of oneness of that operating system. And that's why it's so painful in the ego operating system, because the ego operating system operates with grievances and complaints, judgments and evaluations. And want to plant another little C here, is that's exactly what the Bible talks about in the Garden of Eden. The Lord says, do not eat from the tree of knowledge. Do not eat from the tree of good and evil. But right here in River City, people are eating good and evil every day. It's their main course of food, but they don't want to give up the right. People don't want to give up the right to judge, because then I'd be out of control. And I'm not out of control. No way. How dare you think that? But you're really stuck in a prison, but you don't know it.
That's the ego.
That's the ego. That's the ego. That's the conceptual ego. And the idea is concepts are words or thoughts. You begin to put holes in the words and thoughts that you speak, like I just did. That puts holes in the fabric that is the speaking, and the speaking is, you ask, who do you speak for? Well, you speak for me. Who's me? That's my ego. That's my identity. I speak for my identity. And if I can begin to control my voice by putting empty spaces between the sounds that I speak, I control my timing. And when you control the timing, then there's a choice about how you want to vibrate the air. And your choice comes from the spirit of God, or it comes from the revenge of the ego. You can vibrate it either way you want. But you know that if I vibrate for joy, joy appears. If I vibrate for my opinion about what we're talking about, then opinion and what I talk about appears in the dream. And that goes back exactly what you said, which I just underlined it again. You are what you think you are. So stop worrying about outside. Take a look at, how do you construct the way you think? And is it possible to change the way you think? So that's the question. I don't know how much time we have, but that's the question. Is it possible to change the way I think, to leave me in a new groove on the record?
I definitely think it's possible. I know it's not easy. Nobody said it was going to be easy, but I definitely think it's possible to change the way that you think. You are able to break generational patterns of thinking if you choose. If you don't want to get out of your comfort zone, if you don't want to break generational patterns, then that's on you. But at the end of the day, the reality is that if you're 15 years old, you're not wearing the same shoes you were when you were 5 years old. And when you were 15, you're not wearing the same shoes you are when you're 20. Why? Because you've outgrown them. And it's okay to outgrow people, places, and things. And if they don't bring you closer to who you want to be, this is such an interesting topic, because people always say, I want to achieve this. I want to buy that. I want to be a New York Times bestselling author. I want to have the #1 podcast in the world. I want to buy a Lamborghini. But what kind of person does it take to achieve those things? What kind of person who is a New York Times bestselling author, what are their habits? What kind of people are they hanging out with? How many cups of coffee do they drink a day? Do they wear sweatpants every day, or do they dress casually every day? What does that look like? Somebody who is a really big podcast, has the #1 podcast in the world. What are their daily habits like? Because if you're not willing to change your daily habits, then you're not going to be able to get to where you want to be if you're not willing to adjust your daily habits and your thinking.
Well, that goes right back to one of the gifts that was given to you at an early age was instruction in ballet.
Yeah.
And one of the benefits that was given to me was military training. And they both, I say, what did I get out of my years in the reserve was discipline. And I suspect out of years of ballet practice, one of the things that you got was discipline. Is that true?
Yes.
And that discipline allows you to be more like a laser in your actions rather than some big spray shotgun thing, go all different directions. I want to do that. And that's the power of purpose. Because if you have a purpose, you have choice about what's in front of you. Is if my purpose, for example, is to be a person representing the blue, and so I'm going along, and I can go to a convention on the blue, or I can go to the convention on the yellow. Well, if I know what my purpose is, and of course it saves time, I go to the blue convention. But if you don't have a purpose, well, I don't know. Maybe the yellow, maybe the blue, maybe nothing. I just don't know. And that is part of the reasons why having a purpose would be very valuable. And you have one.
I believe that we all have a purpose within us. It's, are we willing to dive deep and to do it? I was just talking about this today, and it's like, if you say you love the people in your life, what are you willing to do for them? Are you willing to eat healthy for them? Are you willing to regulate your emotions for them? Are you willing to remove distractions so you can be the best version of yourself for the people that you love? It does start with us, because whatever we're doing, people around us are being affected by that as well. So it's, what are you willing to do, not only for yourself, but the people that you love? Like, for example, if your boss tells you, hey, take out the garbage, you're going to take out the garbage. If your boss asks you to come in an hour earlier or stay an hour late, likely you're going to come in earlier and you're going to stay late. But when you tell yourself you're going to start that business, why did you let yourself down? It doesn't matter if you start at 5 p.m., if you start on a Friday, or you start on the last day of the month. What matters is that you don't let yourself down and you get it done. So what are you willing to do for yourself that other people around you that you can improve the relationships with the people around you? It all starts with us.
And now we take a look at, how do you find your purpose? All right, I'm enrolled, Anita. Yep, I want to find a purpose. I'm going to sit down in my bedroom, and I'm going to have a piece of paper or something, and I'm going to look for my purpose. How do I find this magical purpose you're talking about?
The best way that I can describe it is, look at challenges that you have faced and that you overcame, and how did you overcome them? What are things, this can go either way. It can go from tools and resources, creating tools and resources that have helped you overcome those challenges, because when you help other people get what they want, you will eventually get what you want. So what have you learned? What skills have you curated that have helped you be more successful in your life that you can share with other people? For example, somebody created a wooden pencil. Back in the day, everybody needed wooden pencils. It wasn't a genius invention, but it was something that everybody needed. So whoever created pencils, they helped people get what they want, which was to write on paper. And then they got what they want, was a satisfaction, fulfillment by helping others. So when you help others get what they want, you'll eventually get what you want. It starts with, what have you done? What can you share with others that have helped you? Another great example, the man who created the porta potty. Do you know how many people probably laughed at him? They're like, oh, you're making a bathroom outside. He's like, but listen, when you go to festivals, when you go to concerts, when there's construction workers working outside and there's no bathroom, who's the genius now? He wasn't trying to be the number one and the number two business, but I can tell you that it's a successful business plan because he helped other people get what they want. And now he has fulfillment and more stability in his life because he overcame a challenge and made other people's lives more simple.
You point to one of the differences between the ego's operating system and the spirit's operating systems. The ego's operating system practices taking, and the higher spirit practices giving and sharing. And it's hard for the ego to give something up because it feels like I'm giving a little bit of me up there. I'm not getting anything back. Whereas the higher spirit recognizes that if there's oneness going, if I live in a world of oneness, by giving something to you, something is returned to me. It may not be the physical, but there's some exchange of energy that back and forth, and so I'm actually growing by giving. But the ego doesn't get it. I'm not growing by giving. I'm growing by getting, baby. Let me tell you how to do it. I want to get my car. I want to get my clothes. I want to get my fancy vacations. I want to get my money and want to get one of them boats that Steve Jobs and them guys got. Those huge, mega yacht things with the airplanes and all those kind of things. And so you're stuck in this thought that it's the acquisition of more, which will get you joy and satisfaction. But more lives in the future, doesn't live in the present moment. The present moment is you are just in heaven, satisfied and gratitude for what you have right now and appreciative of all the things that Bill Gates has. God bless him. Let him thank. It's in my dream. I got a rich guy in my dream. All right, fantastic. Rather than he has something that I don't. He shouldn't. I want some of that. Well, in a way, you have it. And so that comes to that oneness of the universal consciousness of the Holy Spirit. And so you're experiencing oneness. And so oneness speaks through you, not separateness speaks through you. And people are attracted to that.
Absolutely. It's like you cannot work out of the ego, because I was listening to a pastor over the weekend, and he said, God is not obligated to finish what you started, also meaning out of ego, but God is obligated to finish what he started, and that is from a giving mentality and from the faith side. So if your purpose or what you're trying to do is not created on the solid foundation of faith and purpose, then it's likely not going to go the way that you plan, because God is not obligated to finish what you started, but he's obligated to finish what he started. And what he starts in you, it starts with a purpose, and he gives you the opportunity to grow through challenges so you can use that as a testimony of what he can do and how he turns ashes into something beautiful. So I'm a firm believer in that. My ex-husband, everything you explained, working out of the ego, I saw it from both sides. I was trying to keep my faith, and he was trying to destroy me with his ego. He always wanted more, and he always wanted it to take. And clearly, it made us go our separate ways because he was always ego-driven, and he couldn't put that down. So think about it this way. When you're building your house, what kind of foundation do you want to build your house on? Do you want it fast? Do you want it selfish? And do you want it just built by anyone and anything, just by taking things? Or do you want to put time and effort and love and attention to all the detail to build a solid foundation? The choice is yours, and that's with anything.
There's a phrase, and it had to do with a firm foundation is required in order not to have uncertainty in your life. And the exercise that I do with students is I take a water bottle and I turn it upside down so the neck of the water bottle is on your palm. I say, well, try to balance the bottle. And of course the bottle wobbles and falls. Then I say, flip it over, put the bottom of the bottle on your palm, and it's solid, it's grounded. So in trying to deal with all the agitation in various forms that you see in the outer world, you want a firm foundation under your feet. But most people are inside their head, and they are not in their bodies, and they are living the Buddhist concept of the disembodied state of consciousness versus the embodied state of consciousness. And that's the desire to be embodied. Well, what does that mean? That means shutting off the flow of thought, being able to turn the faucet off. And so you no longer have thoughts anymore. You can stop because all your attention is on your breath. And I noticed, and I suppose you noticed, is that when all your attention is on your breathing, you can't multitask. You can't be having half of yourself thinking about thoughts and half of yourself counting to 1, 2, 3, 4 in meditation and breathing, because you'll lose your train of thought. And so then you become senior to your thoughts. And boy, that to me is fantastic, because when you become senior to your thoughts, you're reaching a level of awareness called observation. You're able to observe the thoughts, observe the emotions. A watcher, in other words, a word for it. Also, it's a watcher, the observer, and there's a third one there, but it's the idea of a separation of space. And so I know it's another conversation. Space is really the medicine, the vitamins that people need in order to dissolve the glue of the ego. But space is a metaphysical experience, and it's a little challenging to try to let the ego talk about space, because the ego's, the ego's in a defending space is a disappearing act. Now, I don't want to disappear, so I'm not interested in empty space. I want a lot of things. I want congestion in my world.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with everything you've said. So, Alan, what does it mean for you to be nourished inside out?
Meeting people like you. It's like a candy store. It's like a health check, a mental health check of all the things that I'm experiencing, like this God thing, this Holy Spirit thing, the second voice inside my head thing. That's a little, woo-woo for me. And yet here you are, a firm believer, sharing your experience with me. And so then my trust builds up. And as my trust builds up, I'm willing to hear things. I'm willing to do some research that I wasn't willing to do before. I look at it, I always say, you don't know if it's right, you don't know if it's wrong. You just have to be willing to do the research, and you judge what's right and wrong based on research, not based on what Anita told you or what Alan told you. No, you taste it yourself and see what it tastes like. If it tastes good, then get some more. If it doesn't taste good, and then good, I taste it, and I don't eat that food anymore.
That's incredible. Can you please tell us, where can people find you, and where can they support you, and where can they listen to your podcast, The Mindful You?
The Mindful You podcast is on all the platforms that you have. I always see it on Apple, but I know it's all over the place. The website is ACA, Alan Carroll Associates, ACA, Mindful You, and it's mindful, you is YOU.com. And that just gives you another flavor, a taste of what we're up to. And what we're up to is the same thing you're up to. I'm in the corporate business of transforming speakers. And just like I shared, speaking is either under your control or it's not in your control. And most people are amateurs. They don't control their speaking because they don't control the timing. But if you do, you have executive presence, you have the emotional intelligence, you have professional communication. This is all these things corporations want. So I've developed a process and a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, depending what you want, type of training to transform your ability to speak, which is a form of transforming your level of consciousness, because you have to be present in the moment to tell your mind to stop and to tell your mind to start. There's a dance. We got to be present to do that dance.
It's incredible. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're
today,
incredible.
Alan.
You're incredible. It's a privilege to be able to spend some time on a Wednesday afternoon in June. What a pleasure it is.
It's been an absolute pleasure on my end as well. Thank you for everything, Alan.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Anita.